Commander Zara Eth stood near the large window of Unity Prime Station. Her forearms were crossed as she looked out at the stars. She was angry, and anyone who knew her could see it in the way she held herself. The station floated in space between several planets, and it served as a meeting place for all the different species in the galaxy. 15 different alien races sent their people here to talk, trade, and work together. Zara Eth had been here for 3 months now, working as part of the security team. She was a Calvorian, and her people were famous across the galaxy as the best fighters. Calvorians were built for war. They had thick skin that was hard like armor. They had 4 arms instead of 2. Their muscles were dense and powerful, much stronger than most other species. They also had backup organs inside their bodies, which meant they could survive injuries that would kill others. For hundreds of years, the Calvorians had trained in combat. They had created fighting styles that no one else could match. Zara Eth herself had been fighting for 20 years, and she had never lost a single duel. Not one. That was why the humans confused her so much. The humans had only joined the Galactic Council 2 years ago. They were new, and yet they were already causing problems. Not the kind of problems that came from being aggressive or dangerous. No, the humans caused problems because they refused to quit. They were stubborn in a way that made no sense to Zara Eth. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They were not even the smartest when compared to some of the other races. But somehow they kept succeeding at things that should have been impossible for them. What really made Zara Eth angry was the human who worked on her security team. His name was Lieutenant Jake Morrison. The human male was ordinary by the standards of his own species. He was shorter than Zara Eth by quite a bit. He only had 2 arms, which seemed like a huge disadvantage. His skin was pale and looked like it would tear easily compared to her thick hide. But he walked around the station like he owned the place, full of confidence that he had not earned. What made it worse was that the other aliens on the station seemed to like him. They respected him. Zara Eth could not understand why. Everything came to a head during the morning meeting with the security team. Captain Velthar was in charge of all security on the station. He was a Xanthari, which meant he had tentacles around his face and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. During the meeting, he told everyone about the upcoming trade summit. Important leaders from many worlds would be coming to the station, and security would need to be perfect. Then Captain Velthar made his announcement. Lieutenant Morrison will lead the security detail for the summit. Zara Eth felt her anger spike. She stood up quickly, her forearms uncrossing. "I am the senior combat officer here," she said, her voice coming out harsh even through the translator device that turned her clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. "This job should be mine." Captain Velthar's face tentacles moved in a way that might have been amusement. "Lieutenant Morrison has shown he can handle this. He will lead." Zara Eth wanted to argue more, but she knew it would do no good. The captain had made his decision. She sat back down and waited for the meeting to end, her mind already forming a plan. After the meeting finished, Zara Eth waited in the corridor outside. She knew Morrison would come this way. When he walked out talking to another human, Zara Eth stepped in front of him. The other human quickly left when she saw Zara Eth's expression. Morrison turned to face her. His eyes were strange, facing forward instead of to the sides like most species. It made him look like a predator, even though humans were not particularly dangerous compared to real predators in the galaxy. His face showed nothing, no fear and no anger. He just waited. "I challenge you to a duel," Zara Eth said. Her voice echoed off the metal walls. "We fight by council law. The fight continues until one of us gives up or cannot continue. If I win, I lead the summit security. If you win," she paused, the words hard to say, "I will accept that humans can be in charge of security." Morrison looked at her for a long time. His eyes did not blink. Zara Eth had heard that humans could stare for a long time without blinking, and it was unsettling to experience. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay, when?" "Tomorrow. When the day cycle starts. Training Arena 3. I will be there," Morrison said. Then he turned and walked away, his steps calm and even. Zara Eth watched him go. She felt strange, like something was wrong, but she could not figure out what. She had expected him to be scared, or to try to talk his way out of the fight. She had expected him to make excuses or to act tough. But he had done none of those things. He had simply agreed and walked away, like the duel was just another item on his schedule. By that evening, everyone on Unity Prime knew about the challenge. News traveled fast on a space station, and a duel between species was big news. Aliens from all 15 council races talked about it in the dining areas and the recreation spaces. Some thought Zara-Eth would win easily. Others were not so sure. The betting started within hours, with people wagering credits on the outcome. The odds were 5-1 in Zara-Eth's favor, which made her feel satisfied. At least people understood reality. In her quarters, Zara-Eth prepared for the fight. She went through her meditation routine, clearing her mind and focusing her thoughts. Then she practiced her combat moves. She struck at the air with all 4 arms, her movements smooth and fast. Each strike had the power to break bones. Each combination was designed to overwhelm an opponent from multiple angles. She had trained these moves since she was young, practicing them thousands of times until they were as natural as breathing. Calvorian fighting style was based on using all 4 arms together. While an opponent tried to defend against 1 or 2 attacks, the other arms would strike from different angles. It was nearly impossible to defend against when done correctly. Zara-Eth could hit with 3 times the force of a human. She could keep fighting for hours without getting tired. She was, by any measure, a perfect warrior. As she practiced, she thought about how the fight would go. Morrison would probably try to use speed since he could not match her strength. She would need to be careful not to let him dance around too much. She would cut off his movements, corner him, and then overwhelm him with a combination he could not defend. It would be quick. Maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5. Then it would be over, and the proper order would be restored. Across the station in his smaller quarters, Jake Morrison sat at his desk. He was watching videos on his computer screen. The videos showed Calvorian fighters in combat. He watched how they moved, how they struck, how they defended. His roommate, Corporal Lisa Hayes, stood in the doorway watching him. "You know this is crazy, right?" Lisa said. She had her arms crossed, looking worried. "She has twice your weight and 4 arms. Calvorians have beaten champions from 6 different species." "I know," Jake said. He did not look away from the screen. "So what is your plan? Because if you are just going to try hard and hope it works, I am going to be really disappointed." Jake finally looked up at her. He had a small smile on his face. "The plan is to remember what we are good at." "And what is that?" "Lasting a long time, adapting, thinking in different ways." He looked back at the screen. Calvorians are amazing fighters. Strong, fast, well-trained. But they fight with honor and tradition. They expect things to go certain ways. Lisa raised one eyebrow. "So you are going to fight dirty?" "I am going to fight smart," Jake said. "I will follow the rules, but I will not do what they expect." He spent the next several hours studying. He watched not just Calvorian fights, but human fights too. He watched boxers and wrestlers. He watched mixed martial arts fighters. He studied every time in human history when a smaller fighter had beaten a larger one. He looked at how they used leverage, which was using an opponent's weight against them. He looked at timing, which meant striking at exactly the right moment. He studied the simple physics of how bodies moved. At midnight, Lisa brought him food. "You should sleep. Soon," Jake said. But he kept studying for another hour, memorizing movements and planning strategies. In another part of the station, the other humans gathered together. Word had spread quickly through the human group about the duel. Most of them were worried. They knew what it would mean if Jake lost badly. It would make all humans look weak. The other species would think humans did not belong on the security force. But if Jake could lose with dignity, at least it would show courage. And if somehow he won, well, that would change everything. "He is not going to win," said Private Carl Jenkins. He shook his head. "I have seen Zara-Eth train. She is incredible." "Jake is smart, though," said Ensign Amy Foster. "He would not have said yes if he did not have some kind of plan." "Plans only help so much when someone who can lift a shuttle is trying to smash you," Carl said. The humans talked late into the night. They were worried, but they were loyal. Win or lose, Jake was one of them. They would support him no matter what happened. In her quarters, Zara-Eth finished her meditation and went to sleep. She dreamed of victory, of proving that Calvorians were superior, of restoring proper order. Tomorrow she would show everyone what real strength looked like. In his quarters, Jake finally turned off his computer. He lay down but did not sleep right away.
Heatho.
Training Arena 3 was crowded when the day cycle began. The circular fighting floor sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by multiple levels of seating that rose up like steps. Every seat was full. Aliens from all 15 council species had come to watch. Some had tentacles, some had scales, some had fur, and some had skin like humans. But they all wanted to see the same thing. They wanted to see if the human could survive against a Calvorian warrior. The arena had a special gravity field that was set to council standard. This meant the gravity was comfortable for most species, not too heavy and not too light. Medical teams waited at the edges of the arena. They had equipment ready to treat injuries. Everyone hoped the injuries would not be too serious, but with a Calvorian fighting, you never knew. Zara-Eth entered first through the main gate. She wore special wrappings on her body that left all 4 of her arms free to move. The wrappings were traditional Calvorian combat gear, passed down through generations of warriors. She walked to the center of the arena with her head high. The Calvorian section of the crowd made clicking sounds with their mandibles, which was how they cheered. Most of the other aliens were quiet, showing respect. Zara-Eth looked powerful and confident, every bit the champion she was. Jake Morrison entered from the opposite gate. He wore simple human military clothes, nothing fancy or traditional. The human section of the crowd erupted with cheers and shouts of encouragement. But there were not many humans on the station, maybe 30 total, so their voices were overwhelmed by the much larger crowd. Jake's face was calm as he walked to meet Zara-Eth in the center. Inside, his heart was beating fast, but his expression showed nothing. Captain Velthar moved to stand between them. His voice was amplified so everyone in the arena could hear. This is a formal challenge under council law. The fight continues until one person gives up or cannot continue fighting. The medical teams will decide if someone cannot continue. You cannot kill your opponent. If you break this rule, you will be arrested and charged with a crime. His tentacles pointed at each fighter. Do you both understand these rules? I understand, Zara-Eth said. Her 4 arms flexed, muscles rippling under her thick skin. Understood, Jake said. Then begin. Velthar moved quickly out of the way. Zara-Eth immediately walked forward. She was taller than Jake and her arms were longer, which meant she could hit him while staying out of his reach. She attacked with a classic Calvorian combination. 2 arms struck high at his head and shoulders while her lower 2 arms swept low, trying to knock his legs out from under him. It was an opening move that had defeated countless opponents. Jake did not try to block the strikes. He did not try to hit back. He just moved backward and to the side, letting her fists pass through empty air where he had been a moment before. Zara-Eth adjusted her position and pressed forward. She launched another combination of strikes. Again, Jake moved back, his movements small and precise. He was not wasting energy on big movements. The crowd started to murmur. Some of the Calvorians made clicking sounds that expressed disapproval. This looked like cowardice to them. A warrior should stand and fight, not run away. Zara-Eth felt anger flash through her. Stand and fight, human, she shouted. But Jake just kept moving. He circled around her, always staying just outside the reach of her 4 arms. His eyes never left her. He watched how she moved, how she breathed, where she put her weight when she prepared to strike. Zara-Eth launched herself forward with more speed and power. She was determined to corner him against the arena wall. She threw a rapid series of strikes, all 4 arms moving so fast they blurred. One punch caught Jake's shoulder. It was not a clean hit, just a glancing blow. But it would have broken bones if it had landed directly. Jake rolled with the impact, using the force to spin away and create more distance between them. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Zara-Eth was landing occasional hits, but nothing that did serious damage. Jake had not been hit cleanly even once. But he also had not thrown a single punch or kick. He had not tried to attack at all. The crowd grew restless. Some aliens started shouting, "Is the human going to fight or just run?" Someone yelled, "This is boring." Another voice called out. Zara-Eth's breathing was still steady. Calvorians had incredible stamina and could fight for hours without getting tired. But she was beginning to feel something she had never felt in a fight before. Frustration. She had never fought someone who completely refused to engage. Every other opponent had tried to trade blows with her to match her strength. But this human just kept moving, kept evading, kept staying out of reach. She pressed harder. She moved faster. She tried to predict where he would go and cut off his escape routes. She used feints, pretending to strike one way and then attacking another. But Jake seemed to read her intentions. He was always moving just before her strikes arrived, always finding space to retreat into. Jake's breathing was heavier now. Sweat dripped down his face. His shoulder hurt where she had hit him, and he could feel other bruises forming where her strikes had grazed him. But his eyes remained focused. His mind was calm. He was counting her strikes in his head. He was memorizing her patterns. He was watching for the tiny movements she made before each attack. The way her upper right shoulder dipped slightly before that arm struck. The way her weight shifted to her back leg before she swept with her front legs. Every fighter had tells, small unconscious movements that gave away their intentions. Jake was learning hers, and he was waiting for the right moment. 15 minutes became 20. Zarath had been in many fights, but none had lasted this long without a clear winner. She was still strong, still fast, but her arms were starting to feel heavy. She had thrown hundreds of strikes, and almost all of them had hit nothing but air. This was not how fights were supposed to go. In the crowd, the other humans were tense. Lisa Hayes sat with her hands clenched together. "Come on, Jake," she whispered. "Whatever you are planning, do it soon." Carl Jenkins shook his head. "He is just delaying the inevitable. She is going to catch him eventually." But Amy Foster was watching more carefully. "Look at her breathing," she said quietly. "She's getting tired. Jake is making her work for every strike. He is wearing her down." Carl looked closer and realized Amy was right. Zarath was still powerful, but her movements were slightly slower than they had been at the start. Her breathing was heavier. Meanwhile, Jake looked tired but steady. His pace had not changed. "Persistence hunting," Amy said. "It is what humans used to do on Earth. We would chase animals for hours and hours until they collapsed from exhaustion. We were never the fastest, but we could keep going longer than anything else." In the arena, Jake continued his pattern. Move back, circle, evade, watch. He was not just avoiding her attacks randomly. He was learning her rhythm, her timing, her preferences. He noticed that she favored her upper arms for power strikes. He noticed that after certain combinations, she had a brief moment where she reset her stance. He noticed that her lower left arm was slightly slower than the others. These were small things, but they were important. Zarath was beyond frustrated now. She was angry at herself for not ending this quickly. She was angry at the human for refusing to fight properly, and underneath the anger, in a place she did not want to acknowledge, she was worried. This was not supposed to be hard. She was supposed to win easily. But nothing about this fight was easy. She decided to take a risk. She would commit fully to one massive combination, using all four arms in a sequence designed to leave no escape. It was aggressive and left her slightly unbalanced, but it had never failed to overwhelm an opponent. She launched the attack. All four arms struck in rapid succession, high and low, left and right, creating a wall of force that should have been impossible to evade. Jake had nowhere to go. The arena wall was behind him. Her strikes covered every angle. But Jake did something that shocked everyone watching. Instead of trying to retreat, he stepped forward. He moved inside her reach, where her long arms lost most of their power. Her strikes, calculated for an opponent further away, hit him but without their full force. Jake ducked under her upper arms and moved to her side. And for the first time in the fight, he attacked. He kicked hard at the back of her forward knee. The joint bent the same way a human knee bent, and his kick had precise targeting and timing. Zarath's leg buckled. She stumbled forward, trying to catch herself with her arms. But Jake was already moving. He grabbed her upper right arm, using her own momentum against her, and executed a throwing technique. It was a move from human martial arts using leverage and timing instead of strength. Zarath hit the floor hard. The impact knocked the air out of her lungs. The arena exploded with noise. Shocked shouts and clicks and whistles came from every species watching. A human had just thrown a Calvorian. Zarath's training took over. She rolled immediately, not allowing herself to be pinned or struck while she was down. But when she looked up, Jake was not pressing his advantage. He had moved back to a safe distance. He was breathing hard, his hands up in a defensive position, ready to continue. Zarath got to her feet. Her mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The human had actually thrown her. He had put her on the ground. The implications made her furious. She was a Calvorian champion. This should not have happened. She charged again, but the 30-minute mark passed. Zarath had been in fights before that lasted a long time, but those had been training exercises or ceremonial duels with strict rules and frequent breaks. This was different. This was continuous combat, and her body was telling her things she did not want to hear. Her arms felt heavy. Her breathing was labored. The knee that Jake had targeted multiple times was starting to hurt with each step. Jake looked exhausted too. His face was red and covered in sweat. Bruises were forming on his arms and ribs where her strikes had connected. His movements were slower than they had been at the start, but he was still moving, still evading, still countering when he saw an opening, and his eyes were still focused and alert. Zara-Eth threw another combination, but it was weaker than before. Jake blocked one strike, evaded another, and countered with a quick punch to her ribs. It did not hurt much through her thick skin, but it was another point scored. Another small victory for the human. The crowd had changed their tune. At the start, they had expected a quick Calvorian victory. Now they were watching something unexpected. The humans in the crowd were on their feet, cheering every time Jake landed a hit or avoided a strike. Even the other species were becoming invested in the fight. Some were cheering for Zara-Eth, but others were starting to cheer for Jake. The underdog was winning them over. "That human has heart," said a Zenthari in the crowd to his companion. "He has more than heart," replied his friend, a scaled Draxian. "He has strategy. Look how he targets the same spots repeatedly. He is breaking her down piece by piece." In the Calvorian section, there was uncomfortable silence. This was not supposed to happen. Calvorians were supposed to dominate combat. They had built their entire culture around being the best warriors. Watching one of their champions struggle against a human was deeply unsettling. Zara-Eth launched another attack, trying to use her superior strength to overwhelm Jake. She managed to land a solid hit to his side. Jake grunted in pain and stumbled back. Zara-Eth pressed forward, sensing victory. She threw a combination at his head, but Jake was not as hurt as he appeared. The stumble was partially controlled. He used it to create an angle, and when Zara-Eth overextended her upper arms reaching for him, he ducked under and struck at her knee again. This time the kick landed perfectly on the joint. Zara-Eth felt something give in her knee. Not a break, but something was damaged. Pain shot through her leg. She took a step back, trying to put weight on the leg. It held, but barely. The knee was compromised. Jake had been systematically attacking it throughout the fight, and now it was failing. She tried to hide the injury, but Jake saw it immediately. His eyes tracked her movement, noting the slight limp, the way she favored her other leg. Zara-Eth felt fear for the first time in the fight. She was injured. Her stamina was fading, and the human was still dangerous. She needed to end this now before she lost completely. She gathered her remaining strength and launched a desperate attack. All four arms struck at once, abandoning technique for raw power. If even one of these strikes landed cleanly, it would end the fight. Jake saw the attack coming. It was reckless, emotional. Zara-Eth was fighting with anger and fear now instead of discipline. He waited until the last possible moment, then dropped low, letting her strikes pass over him. He swept her good leg out from under her. With her injured knee unable to support her sudden shift in weight, Zara-Eth fell hard. This time she fell on her front, her four arms sprawled out. She tried to push herself up immediately, but her injured knee would not support her weight. She got her upper body off the ground using her arms, but standing up properly was another matter. Jake moved back to a safe distance and waited. He was breathing hard, his whole body aching. But he was standing. Captain Velthar moved closer, his tentacles waving with concern. "Commander Zara-Eth, can you continue?" Zara-Eth tried again to stand. She got one leg under her, but when she tried to put weight on the injured knee, it buckled completely. She fell back down to her hands and knees. She had 3 good limbs, but that was not enough to fight effectively. Not against an opponent who was still mobile and alert. She looked up at Jake. The human was bruised and exhausted. He was clearly in pain, but he was standing upright, his hands still up in a defensive position, ready to continue if she somehow managed to get up. She expected to see triumph in his eyes, or mockery, or cruelty. Instead, she saw only respect and readiness. He was not enjoying her defeat. He was simply prepared to do what was necessary. That look made Zara-Eth understand something profound. This was what human strength looked like. It was not about being the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. It was about refusing to give up. It was about taking damage and continuing forward. It was about thinking instead of just fighting. And perhaps most importantly, it was about having the discipline to show mercy when victory was certain. The words were difficult to say. She had never said them before in her entire life. "I yield." The arena erupted. The sound was deafening. The human section exploded with cheers and screams of joy. Other species joined in, their various sounds of celebration creating a cacophony that echoed through the space. The Calvorian section sat in shocked silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. Jake walked over to Zareth, moving stiffly because of his injuries. He extended his hand down to her. Zareth looked at the offered hand for a moment. It was a human gesture offering help. She reached up with her upper right hand and grasped his wrist in the Calvorian way of showing respect. Jake gripped her wrist in return and helped pull her up. He let her lean on him as the medical team arrived to support her weight. "You fought with honor," Zareth said. Her translator turned her clicks and whistles into words. "I underestimated you. I underestimated your entire species. You are an incredible fighter," Jake said honestly. His voice was strained from exhaustion. "If this fight had lasted 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes, I would not have had a chance. But we humans, we are stubborn. It is kind of what we do." The medical team carefully examined both fighters. Zareth had a damaged knee ligament that would need treatment. She also had bruising on her arms and ribs. Jake had a cracked rib, multiple bruises, and his shoulder was badly swollen where she had hit him early in the fight. But nothing was life-threatening. Both fighters would recover fully. As the medical team worked, Jake looked up at the crowd. He found the human section and gave them a tired smile and a small wave. They went wild, chanting his name. Lisa Hayes had tears in her eyes. Amy Foster was hugging Carl Jenkins, who looked stunned. The other humans were celebrating like their species had just won a war. In a way, they had. Not a war of violence, but a war of perception. Humans had been seen as the weak newcomers, the species that did not quite belong among the powerful races of the galaxy. Jake's victory changed that. It showed that humans had their own kind of strength. They might not be able to match a Calvorian in raw power, but they had other advantages. Endurance, adaptability, intelligence, determination. These were not flashy traits, but they were effective. Word of the duel spread beyond Unity Prime within hours. Ships carried the news to different planets. Communication networks buzzed with discussions. The fight was recorded and the video was analyzed by military experts across the galaxy. Combat instructors from a dozen species studied Jake's tactics. What they saw fascinated them. The human had not tried to match Calvorian's strength. That would have been foolish. Instead, he had used mobility and patience. He had studied his opponent and targeted weaknesses. He had used leverage and technique instead of power. He had turned a 30-minute fight into an endurance contest, which played to human advantages. And he had done all of this while following the rules and fighting with honor. On the Calvorian homeworld, the Warrior Council received news of the duel. There was initial disbelief, then anger, then thoughtful consideration. The eldest warriors watched the recording multiple times. They saw things that the average viewer missed. They saw how the human had studied Zareth's patterns. They saw how he had systematically targeted the same joint repeatedly. They saw how he had conserved energy while forcing her to expend hers. "This human fights like a hunter, not a warrior," said one council member. "Is there a difference?" asked another. "He won. That is what matters." "He won through persistence and intelligence," said the eldest warrior. "These are not traits we have valued highly in our combat doctrine. Perhaps we should." Back on Unity Prime, Jake was sitting in the medical bay with an ice pack on his ribs. Lisa sat beside him, still grinning. "You did it," she said for the 10th time. "You actually beat her." "I survived," Jake corrected. "If she had caught me cleanly even once, this would have ended very differently. But she did not." "Because you were smart." Jake nodded slowly. "I used what we are good at. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the toughest. But we can adapt. We can endure. We can learn and think and plan. And maybe most importantly, we do not give up." "You made us all proud," Lisa said quietly. "You showed them that humans belong here." Jake smiled, though it hurt his bruised face. "We have always belonged here. Now they just know it." In her own medical bay room, Zareth was thinking about. 2 days after the duel, the trade summit began. The security detail was tense because leaders from multiple planets were gathering on Unity Prime. Any mistake could cause diplomatic incidents or worse. Jake Morrison led the security team as planned, and working directly with him at her own request was Zara Yeth. The arrangement surprised many people on the station. Everyone had expected awkwardness or hostility between them after the duel. Instead, they worked together smoothly. Zareth had spent the past 2 days studying human combat techniques and human history. The more she learned, the more fascinated she became. On the first day of the summit, during a quiet moment between security checks, Zara-Eth approached Jake. They were standing in an observation area overlooking the main conference hall where ambassadors from different worlds were negotiating trade agreements. "I have been reading about your species," Zara-Eth said. Her translator turned her clicks into common language. Jake looked at her with interest. "Oh, what did you learn?" "That your people are strange," Zara-Eth said bluntly. "You chase prey animals for hours until they die from exhaustion. You drink alcohol, which is a poison. You keep predator animals as pets in your homes. You go into space in fragile metal containers powered by controlled explosions. By all logic, your species should not have survived. Yet you thrive," Jake smiled slightly. "When you put it that way, we do sound a little crazy." Zara-Eth's mandibles moved, and what Jake had learned was laughter. "Perhaps that is your greatest strength. You do not accept limitations as permanent. When you encounter something impossible, you see it as a challenge to overcome." "Is that a bad thing?" Jake asked. "No," Zara-Eth said thoughtfully. "I am beginning to think it is the most dangerous trait a species can have. Dangerous to your enemies, I mean." Over the next several days, as the summit continued, Zara-Eth and Jake developed an unexpected friendship. They talked during breaks, sharing stories about their respective cultures. Zara-Eth told Jake about Calvorian warrior traditions, about honor codes and combat rituals that went back thousands of years. Jake told her about human history, about wars and explorations and the long struggle of humanity to survive and advance. Zara-Eth was particularly interested in human combat sports. Jake showed her videos of boxing matches, wrestling competitions, and mixed martial arts fights. She watched small human fighters defeat larger ones through technique and strategy. She saw patterns that reminded her of how Jake had fought in their duel. "In my culture, we respect strength above all else," Zara-Eth said one evening. They were in the training room, and Zara-Eth was carefully exercising her healing knee. "The strongest warrior is the most respected, but I am starting to see that strength comes in many forms." "Physical strength is important," Jake agreed. He was practicing stretches, working out the soreness from his injuries. "But mental strength matters too. The strength to keep going when you want to quit. The strength to adapt when your first plan fails. The strength to learn from defeat." "I lost our duel," Zara-Eth said. "In my culture, that is a mark of shame." "In human culture, losing is just information," Jake said. "It tells you what you need to improve. Some of our greatest warriors lost many fights before they became great. Losing teaches you things that winning never can." This concept was new to Zara-Eth. Calvorian culture emphasized victory. Warriors who lost too often were not respected, not given important positions. But humans seemed to view defeat differently. It was not the end of a warrior's career, just a setback to learn from. "Will you teach me human fighting techniques?" Zara-Eth asked suddenly. Jake looked surprised. "Seriously? You want to learn from someone you could probably still beat in a fair fight?" "That duel was a fair fight and you won," Zara-Eth said firmly. "You have knowledge I do not. I want to learn it." So they began training together. Jake taught Zara-Eth the basics of human martial arts, how to use leverage to throw opponents much larger than yourself, how to target joints and pressure points instead of just hitting with maximum power, how to conserve energy and pick your moments. Zara-Eth was a quick learner. Her forearms gave her advantages that no human had. And when she combined Calvorian techniques with human strategies, she became even more formidable. In return, Zara-Eth taught Jake more advanced Calvorian combat techniques. She showed him how to read an opponent's body language, how to identify patterns and fighting styles. She taught him Calvorian conditioning exercises that pushed his endurance even further. Jake would never have a Calvorian's natural strength, but he could learn their discipline and knowledge. Word spread through the station about their training sessions. Other security personnel started watching. Some even asked to join in. Soon there were regular mixed species training sessions happening in the arena. Humans learned from Calvorians. Calvorians learned from humans. Other species contributed their own fighting traditions. It became a melting pot of combat knowledge. One evening, after a particularly hard training session, Jake asked Zara-Eth a question that had been on his mind. "Why did you challenge me to that duel? Was it really about leading the security detail?" Zara-Eth was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Honestly, it was about pride. My people are taught that we are the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and we are by most measures. But then humans arrived. And you were confident in a way that irritated me. You had not earned your confidence through raw power. Yet you carried yourselves like equals. I wanted to prove that you were inferior. And now? Jake asked. Now I understand that there are many ways to be strong, Zara said. You are not inferior. You are different. And that difference is a strength, not a weakness. Their friendship became known throughout Unity Prime. It became a symbol of something larger than just two individuals getting along. It represented the possibility that different species could learn from each other, that cooperation was better than competition, that diversity made everyone stronger. The Calvorian homeworld took notice. The Warrior Council received reports about Zara training with a human, about her incorporating human techniques into her fighting style. Initially, there was disapproval from the more traditional council members, but the eldest warriors saw potential. Our combat doctrine has remained mostly unchanged for 500 years, the eldest warrior said during a council session. We have grown stagnant. These humans, they constantly evolve and adapt. Perhaps we should learn from them. A younger council member spoke up. But they are physically weaker than us. What can they teach us? The eldest warrior gestured to a screen showing footage of the duel. Watch again. The human did not try to match our strength. He used his strengths, intelligence, endurance, adaptability. He turned the fight into a contest that favored his advantages. This is wisdom we have not fully embraced. We rely too much on power and not enough on strategy. The debate continued for hours, but eventually a decision was made. Calvorian combat schools would begin studying human tactics. They would not abandon their traditions, but they would expand them. It was a significant shift in thinking for a species that had believed they had perfected warfare. Back on Unity Prime, Jake received a message from Earth. It was from his old military instructor, a grizzled veteran who had trained Jake years ago. The message was simple. Saw the video. You made us all proud. You proved that being smart is just as important as being strong. Remember, we might not be the biggest or the toughest, but we are human. We endure. We adapt. We win. Keep showing them what we are capable of. Jake showed the message to Zara. She read it carefully. Your people have a strong identity. You take pride in your persistence, and we have to, Jake said. We do not have natural armor like some species. We do not have 4 arms or enhanced strength or toxic breath or any of the physical advantages others have. All we have is our minds and our refusal to quit. So yeah, we take pride in that. It is what makes us human. Zara nodded slowly. Every species has their strength. Calvorians have physical power. Synthari have telepathic abilities. Draxians have regeneration. And humans have persistence and adaptability. These are not lesser strengths. They are simply different. I think you just described the whole point of the Galactic Council, Jake said with a smile. We are all different. We all have different strengths. When we work together, we become stronger than any species could be alone. The trade summit concluded successfully with no security incidents. Jake's leadership was praised by Captain Velthar and the visiting dignitaries. But more importantly, something had changed on Unity Prime. The different species were looking at each other differently. Humans were no longer seen as the weak newcomers. Calvorians were no longer seen as unbeatable. Everyone was starting to understand that they all had something to contribute. In the days following the summit, Zara made a decision. She requested a meeting with Captain Velthar and formally recommended that Jake be promoted to head of security operations. Velthar was surprised by the recommendation coming from her. You are senior to him, Velthar said, his tentacles waving with curiosity. You could take this position yourself. I could, Zara agreed. But I have learned that leadership is not about being the strongest or the most senior. It is about being the best choice for the job. Jake has earned the respect of every species on this station. He leads by example. 6 months passed since the duel. Unity Prime had become a different place. The various species that worked on the station interacted more freely now. Training sessions mixed different species together regularly. The dining areas saw Calvorians eating with humans, Synthari chatting with Draxians, species that had barely acknowledged each other before now forming friendships. Jake Morrison's promotion had worked out well. Security incidents had decreased significantly. The different species working together covered each other's weaknesses and amplified their strengths. But the changes went deeper than just security protocols. The duel had sparked something larger. It had made everyone question their assumptions about strength and ability. Zara received a message from the Calvorian homeworld. The Warrior Council wanted her to return home and speak to combat instructors at the primary military academy. They wanted her to teach what she had learned from humans. It was a tremendous honor, and Zara felt both pride and nervousness about it. Before she left, she met with Jake one final time in the training arena. They had been training together regularly for months, and their fighting styles had evolved. Zara now incorporated human techniques seamlessly with her traditional Calvorian moves. Jake had learned enough Calvorian methods that he could hold his own against opponents much larger than himself. "I will miss these sessions," Zara said as they finished their warm-up exercises. "How long will you be gone?" Jake asked. "Several months at least. Perhaps longer if the Warrior Council wants me to travel to multiple academies." She paused. "I am nervous. Teaching is not something I have done before." "You will do great," Jake assured her. "Just teach them what you learned. That there are many ways to be strong. That learning from others does not make you weaker. It makes you better." "What if they do not listen? Many Calvorians are set in their ways. They believe our methods are already perfect," Jake smiled. "Then show them the video of our duel. Show them how a human half your size put you on the ground. Not to shame you, but to prove that there is always something new to learn." Zarath's mandibles clicked with laughter. Yes, that would certainly get their attention. The proud warrior commander defeated by a human. It will be humbling. "Humility is underrated," Jake said. "Some of the strongest people I have known were also the most humble. They knew their abilities, but they also knew their limits. That awareness made them better. They sparred for another hour, pushing each other, learning from each other. When they finished, they were both breathing hard and covered in sweat. But they were also smiling. This was no longer about proving anything. It was about mutual growth and respect. The next day, Zara departed for the Calvorian homeworld. She carried with her extensive documentation of human combat techniques, training methods, and philosophical approaches to warfare. But more importantly, she carried a new perspective on what it meant to be a warrior. The Calvorian homeworld was a harsh place, much heavier in gravity than Unity Prime. The planet had produced warriors because it demanded strength just to survive. The military academy was located in the mountains, a massive complex of training grounds and classrooms carved into the rock itself. Zara stood before a class of young warriors. They looked at her with respect but also curiosity. Everyone had heard about her duel with a human. Some viewed her loss as shameful. Others were intrigued that she had yielded to a supposedly inferior species. "I am here to teach you about human combat techniques," Zara began. "But more than that, I am here to teach you about a different kind of strength." She played the video of her duel with Jake. The young warriors watched in silence. Some seemed shocked when she hit the ground. Others leaned forward with interest when they saw Jake's techniques. When the video ended, Zara spoke. "I lost this fight. By our traditional measures, that makes me a failure. But I learned more from losing this fight than I learned from winning hundreds of others. Let me tell you what I learned." She spent hours explaining human tactics. She demonstrated how leverage could overcome superior strength. She showed them how targeting specific joints repeatedly could disable a much stronger opponent. She taught them about endurance fighting, about making battles last long enough that persistence became more important than power. But she also taught them something deeper. Humans are not physically superior to us. In a contest of pure strength, we would win every time. But they rarely engage in pure tests of strength. They fight smart. They adapt. They use their minds as much as their bodies. This is not weakness. This is intelligence. One young warrior raised his hand. "But Commander, we are taught that raw power is what matters in combat, that the strongest warrior wins." "I was taught the same thing," Zara replied, "and I believed it completely, until a human proved me wrong. The strongest warrior does not always win. The smartest warrior wins. The warrior who can adapt and endure wins. The warrior who learns from others wins." The class continued for weeks. Zara taught traditional Calvorian techniques but incorporated human concepts. She taught them to think like humans, to see every limitation as a challenge to overcome rather than an impossible barrier. The young warriors were receptive. They had grown up hearing stories about the invincible Calvorian military, but they also lived in a galaxy where Calvorians were just one species among many. They understood that adaptation was necessary. Meanwhile, back on Unity Prime, Jake was dealing with challenges of his own. A delegation from a species called the Vorath had arrived. The Vorath were known for being aggressive and territorial. They were new to the Galactic Council and clearly resented having to follow rules set by others. The Vorath delegation leader was named Krath. He was massive even by Vorath standards. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick scales and powerful limbs, he made it clear from the start that he did not respect Unity Prime's security protocols. "We do not need human guards watching us," Krath said dismissively when Jake tried to brief him on security procedures. "Humans are weak. You have no business telling superior species what to do." Jake remained calm. "These protocols apply to everyone on the station. They are for everyone's safety, including yours." "We Vorath provide our own safety," Krath said. His translator made his growling voice sound even more intimidating. "We do not need protection from lesser beings." Jake could have escalated the situation. He could have pulled rank or made threats. Instead, he simply said, "Understood. The protocols still apply, but I hope your stay here is productive and safe." He walked away, leaving Krath looking somewhat confused. The Vorath leader had expected an argument or a fight. Instead, he got professional courtesy. Over the next few days, the Vorath delegation caused minor problems. They ignored traffic patterns in the corridors. They were loud and disruptive in shared spaces. They intimidated members of other species, but they did not do anything serious enough to warrant action beyond polite warnings. Then came an incident that could have turned dangerous. 2 Vorath guards got into a physical confrontation with a group of Draxian merchants in one of the market areas. The situation was escalating quickly when Jake arrived with his security team. The Vorath were clearly the aggressors, but they were also much larger and more dangerous than the Draxians. Jake positioned his team to protect the merchants while he approached the Vorath guards. "This stops now," Jake said firmly. His voice was not loud, but it carried authority. One of the Vorath guards turned to him. "Stay out of this, human. This does not concern you." "Assault on this station concerns me," Jake replied. "You can stop voluntarily or you can be stopped." "Your choice," the Vorath guard laughed. "You think you can stop me? You are half my size." "Size is not everything," Jake said calmly. "I learned that from a Calvorian warrior who thought the same thing. She learned otherwise. You can too if you insist." The Vorath guard moved toward Jake aggressively. Jake did not back down. His team was ready, but he raised a hand to tell them to wait. The guard reached for Jake, intending to grab him and throw him aside. What happened next was fast. Jake used a technique Zaraeth had taught him. He redirected the guard's momentum, used his weight against him, and put him face down on the floor in a control hold. The entire move took less than 3 seconds. The second Vorath guard started to intervene, but other members of Jake's security team moved in. They included a Calvorian, a Zenthari, and another human. The message was clear. Touch Jake and you fight all of them. Krath arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. He saw one of his guards on the ground, controlled by a human half his size. His expression was difficult to read, but Jake thought he saw surprise and perhaps a hint of respect. "Release him," Krath ordered. Jake let the guard up. The Vorath guard looked humiliated but also thoughtful. He had just been neutralized by someone much smaller than himself. "Your guard initiated physical contact with station residents," Jake said to Krath. "That is a violation of station law. I could arrest him, but I will give you one warning instead. Control your people or I will do it for you." Krath studied Jake for a long moment. "You are confident for such a small creature." "Confidence comes from knowing what you are capable of," Jake replied. "I know what I can do, and I know what my team can do. We do not need to be the biggest or the strongest to be effective.